Good afternoon. My name is Chris Hayden. I'm a partner here at Sikich. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day as we talk about compliance. Now, the first thing that I wanted to do is just to touch base on one slide, which is who Sikich is and why we know about compliance. So, as this slide indicates, we are a multiple disciplinary company that covers accounting, auditing, technology. We rank 34th in the nation in accounting and 9th from a technology standpoint, with over 650 employees in 9 different offices. And so, as the slide also indicates, we have specific services that address compliance issues for businesses, including risk discovery and security and compliance. So when we talk about compliance, what I look at it when I think of compliance is it's a business's requirement to follow certain regulations and rules. And those rules can be self-imposed or they can come from external forces. So certainly internal self-imposed types of compliance could be travel and expense policies that we want our employees to follow. Or perhaps it's a certain level of quality control so that we provide a certain level of customer service. And then external forces would be those governments, whether they be in the United States or internationally, and then customers who put their influence on what they want us to do. So it results in a lot of different sources that we need to deal with when it comes to compliance. And furthermore, if a company is expanding internationally, there's a whole new set of regulatory challenges that surface. For instance, you begin doing business in France, and suddenly you're required to report using their statutory chart of accounts. Or you decide to do business in Brazil or Mexico, and now that introduces a whole new challenge as it comes to specific formats for invoicing. A company may decide to use the cloud as their infrastructure of choice. And now they need to be able to look at their provider and be concerned about their level of compliance. So you may be facing many of these regulatory agencies in your business. There's too many for us to be able to cover a wide range of regulations across all different types of industries. So my goal today is to talk about some of them and give examples about how technology can be used to save manpower hours and also to mitigate risk. There's been talk for years about adopting the International Financial Report Standard in the U.S. Instead of using GAAP. Some companies now are required to report using IFRS, and their accounting systems are just not able to handle that. That requirement for IFRS is also being now pushed down into more of the small and medium-sized business market. In order to meet that requirement for reporting in IFRS, if a system isn't set up to handle it that way, then information needs to be exported, typically using something like Excel, and taking that trial balance and start reclassing things to get it into the IFRS format. So for instance, in IFRS, some leases are capitalized, while in GAAP reporting they're expensed, so that reclassification needs to take place outside the system. If we look at some of the current solutions that are in place that are set up to be able to handle that international standard, the concept of multiple books is introduced. So an example of this system being able to do business in a base book, which is probably GAAP, as well as IFRS and any other. What this means is that transactions can take place in specific books and then reporting done from those specific ledgers. Another self-imposed compliance issue is in the area of expenses and expense policies. As a report indicates that about 15% of asset misappropriations happen with expense reimbursement fraud. We found that many companies simply use the accounts payable process to manage their expense reports, and this includes getting receipts, stapling the receipts, and manually routing those invoices or those expense reports throughout the office to get managers' approvals. Some systems, there are some external systems that can be used, such as Concur, that automates that process, that takes digitized receipts, attaches them, and processes them through a workflow. An example is another ERP solution that has those automated audits and a workflow. For instance, somebody entering an expense report is required to enter justification if it's over a certain dollar amount, or electronically linking receipts and then processing it through a workflow for approval. In this particular solution, if an expense report is entered that violates the audit standards, it is stopped in the workflow and an internal case is created for it to be resolved. So another law that we are required to handle as business leaders is the American Disabilities Act, and this protects those that are disabled against discrimination. You know, ADA doesn't restrict employers from establishing specific functions for a job, but it does require that all individuals be evaluated against the essential functions for that job. So the question is what are the essential functions? And oftentimes when there's legal disputes, the job descriptions are the first things that are being looked at. So I was talking with our HR consulting side and found that as they do audits of companies, as they work with companies, the job descriptions are simply non-existent. So they work with companies to create job descriptions. Often it's just simply something like Word, to have something like that on file so that they can be ADA compliant. So that same type of HR function that the team works with creates those policies and procedures manuals and all. If we look at what can be done within an ERP solution, if that functionality is built in, then we're talking about people and resources and having the job descriptions directly within the system to be able to capture that information, as well as identifying what are those essential functions. So now if there is any type of an ADA audit or any type of a legal challenge that talks about discrimination, there's a basis for the reasons why somebody has been considered for a position and then dismissed. And if we stay with human resources, companies that have over 100 employees need to file an EEO-1 report. That goes back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Similarly, that same companies would be required to file an EEO-4 report on every odd-numbered year. It's one thing if you've got 100 employees and being able to take the information, put it in Excel, run the report, and be able to, in order to create that EEO-1 or EEO-4 report and be compliant. But it becomes much more complex if it's 500 employees or 1,000 employees or 5,000 employees. Having to do that manually takes a tremendous amount of time. So the same type of human resources system that would keep job descriptions and keep information about people are the same ones that should be able to produce an EEO-1 report that's talking about the different types of functions and their ethnic origins, as well as that EEO-4 report, knowing that it's required in every odd-numbered year and being able to produce that report as well. So another agency that has quite a few regulations is OSHA, and those are primarily around safety. So if we look at some of those other sources for compliance, we look at OSHA and we look at forklift drivers, truck drivers. In some instances, if first aid is not within a certain time frame away from an office, that first aid function needs to be provided by employees, and then they need to be certified. Certainly somebody being CPR certified, that all needs to be, somebody needs to be current with its certification on premises. And then we deal with the CPAs and the AICPA and the CPE requirements. In order for CPAs to maintain their certification, they need to go through continuing education. So again, most of the time this is a manual process where we have those folders by employees or so that we're keeping track of the training that they've taken and making sure that that we've got everything current in the file. However, as the number of people increase in a company, it becomes more and more difficult to manage all of the certifications, all of the licenses, who is current and who isn't. So an HR solution or an ERP solution should have the training functionality built in, where I can have classes set up and enroll people with the classes, identify what skill sets that they have an area where we can take a look at a certification and when does it expire, and have those automated type of reminders be emailed to me or come up into my system, so that I'm always staying one step ahead of the game and I'm proactively making sure that I'm in compliance. So this same type of training, as well as the certifications and all, can apply to all different types of industries. Medical workers, we've got organizations that are clients that have all different types of medical staff. So there's different types of nurses. There are doctors with different types of endorsements or different types of specialties, and needing to keep track of all of those things. Certainly with lawyers as well. Having a law firm and keeping track of people's certifications or their licenses, and then what specific practice area. So in another area, I was working with a company that was in Missouri that produces chemicals. And they were looking at some of the challenges that they had faced, and so they're a manufacturer, a process manufacturer, and they produce chemicals that are used by other companies and their manufacturing processes. So they had some very regimented types of regulations that they needed to follow from the customers in order for their product to be in compliance. And some of it is not just the product itself, but making sure that things are in place while the chemical is being made during that process. So there's a series of tests that would need to take place. Testing along the way during that batch processing, recording of all of that takes place, and then at any point in time the customer can come unannounced and do an audit, and there's certain information that needs to be available to them immediately. It could be having to trace something or looking at a test of some particular chemical. In this particular case, they were using Excel, which a lot of companies do, in order to keep track of all of the testing, and a lot of manual papers that were then on clipboards that they would write down the test information, and they would simply know that a test needs to be done. Well, they failed the audit, and as a result they lost the customer and a large chunk of the business. So one of the things that I was faced with was a better way of doing it. So an ERP solution can be, one of the aspects of an ERP solution could be a LIMS system or a laboratory management system that is keeping track of the testing. The tests are initiated They can be part of that manufacturing process, but then it goes into a repository where a report can be generated immediately. So a customer comes in, wants to do an audit, and it's an instantaneous type of result. So I bring up here something which is a certificate of analysis, which is really the end result of going through and setting up tests. In this case, it's setting up tests for a batch process of making something, which is showing various measurement values, what type of instrument is going to be used for this, what's acceptable measures, how much is going to be sampled, is there any quarantining that needs to be done. All of that information should be in the system, and so again it can be reported, and then tests can be generated automatically, and the QC people then just simply do those tests and enter the results online. What you should end up with then is the ability to at any time create system-generated reports like the certificate of analysis or an MSDS sheet. There are all different types of companies that are affected by the FDA and their requirement for tracking. Now, just 2 hours ago, the FDA issued a recall of items prepared with a supplier's ground cumin spice that may have contained undeclared peanut. Those with peanut allergies run the risk of a life-threatening reaction, so Whole Foods, as we speak, is pulling items from their shelves. My example here is for medical devices and the FDA's requirement for tracking on medical devices. Usually when the FDA is issuing a recall, there's some sort of time that is extremely important because it's affecting people and their health. So an FDA tracking system, in this case for medical devices where certain times it needs to be done within 3 days or 10 days, should have the ability to do cradle-to-grave tracking. So just by the push of a button, being able to find everything related with a lot, everything related with a serial number, being able to find who it shipped to, who it was received from, where it was used in production, and immediately being able to recall and provide that information to know where those items were used. I've had a long history with sales tax. So one of the companies that I was working with was a growing company, and it was a company where I was controller, and I would need to work on making sure that we were filing sales taxes in the right places. Well, as the company grew, we would create another office, and then I would research and I would find what is the requirements in that particular state. Well, that was a long time ago, and right now there's over 13,000 taxing jurisdictions in the United States. You do business in the state of New York. Well, you do business with New York City. Not only are you capturing state tax, but you've got borough taxes. If you're dealing in different states, they have different rules. And there was a study that was shown that 55% of financial executives thinks that states notify you if they think that you need to capture sales tax, when in essence they don't. They expect us to know. So it requires each company to be able to be smart in knowing when they're supposed to be collecting sales and use taxes. So we look at, there's really 4 big challenges that we see right now that are affecting CFOs when it comes to Salesforce. And certainly one of the ones is this broader definition of what is a nexus. So let's say in this particular instance it's talking about drop shipping. Well, if you're located in the state of Illinois and you've got an item that you drop ship out of California, it could be that you've now created a nexus even though you don't have a facility there and you need to collect California sales tax. California expects you to know. And then it's the type of product and whether or not it's taxable. So it can be the type of product, or maybe it's the ingredients that are used within a product. We look at software, and those laws are certainly changing. It used to be that you'd buy software off the shelf, or wherever you had a location you'd be charging sales tax. Well, that's changed now that so much sales tax is in the cloud and things are downloaded. Music, is it taxable or not when it's a download? Custom software in Wyoming is not taxable, but pre-written software is. You're expected to know that. And then we look at services. Right now in Illinois, there's a bill before the state to tax certain services in the state of Illinois. Well, it could be cloud services or managed services. Could be services to maintain a copy machine. Interesting to note in Florida that if you're doing floor waxing, that's a taxable service, but carpet cleaning is not. And you need to be able to know that difference. And then finally, it's the sales tax exemption certificate. So we go to charge sales tax and they say, no, I'm tax exempt, and we get a certificate. Well, it doesn't end there, because those need to be, those have an expiration date, and you need to have current exemption certificates on file in order to be compliant. And failure to do that is one of the leading causes of those audit fees with penalties and interest. So we found that in a report by Aberdeen, they found that CFOs underestimate their sales tax compliance by 50%, and that also the average penalty for a negative audit is about $24,000 per occurrence. So when we look at sales tax, things have gotten so complex that we take a look and we look at an outside service in order to be able to address all of that. Although the ERP solutions, most of them have sales tax tables that are written in and can collect sales tax that way, it still requires somebody to maintain those sales tax tables and also know all of those 13,000 taxing jurisdictions and what applies to you. So in this particular example, it's just a company called Avalara that we use. There are others that automates the process. And when I say automates, it's a cloud-based system that integrates, and it integrates with many, many different ERP solutions. And it takes that sales tax responsibility outside of the ERP and into the cloud, so that if there's sales, so that it knows whether or not that particular product, that particular customer, and that particular transaction has a sales or use tax or not. In addition, another one of those services that we frequently use with Avalara, and again, other ones do the same thing, is to keep track at storing those tax exemption certificates. And so it is also stored with reminders, with knowing when they expire, and being able to proactively go out and get current certificates, again, so that we're always in sales tax compliance. So finally, there's a worldwide pressure for companies to be more aware of their impact on the environment. The EPA issues regulations for certain industries, and as we go international, countries like the UK have adopted certain laws for reporting. In this particular case, it's talking about mandatory greenhouse gas reporting, which is now law in the UK. So to do that, to be able to provide that particular report, a company would need to know all of the things that go into their production, from the energy that is expended during the process, the type of emissions that are generated from all of that, as well as all of the transportation that it takes to move it from a supplier to a facility or between facilities. So it would need to be Excel spreadsheets that have lots of calculations, but then also needs to be constantly monitoring the production environment in order to give real-time type reporting. So what some systems do is they provide that carbon footprint tracking, and this is a graphical view of an ERP solution that is looking at would look and track movement between, let's say, a truck and a facility, or within a facility what is being produced and the production. And this would interface with actual production to know at any given time what that carbon footprint is and be able to produce those reports. So I covered a wide variety of different types of compliance issues. Certainly there are so many, many more, but I wanted to give a chance to have you to ask a couple of questions. And so Crystal is letting me know if we have any questions.
Yes. One question that's come in is, what can be done in a system if I get credit cards for payment and I get asked about being PCI compliant?
Okay. That's a good one from a PCI compliance. Actually, it's the PCI stands for the payment card industry, and it's the data security standards that are associated with that. And it's required for all organizations that process or transmit payments that have cardholder data. And so if you've ever logged into a website and you've entered in your credit card number, or it's stored a credit card number, the only thing you see is the last 4 characters. That is one of the things that goes into making a system PCI compliant. Our recommendation typically is to take that credit card processing outside of the ERP solution so that nobody accessing the data or having access to the database can see credit card information. And having that all in a credit card processing system, a PCI system that interfaces with the ERP, that has all of the encryption, encryption and everything necessary to be PCI compliant.
Okay, another question that came in is, if I wanted to look for a cloud solution, what kind of compliance questions should I ask them?
Okay, cloud solution. So there's different types of clouds, whether it be hosting or whether it be truly software as a service, different types of cloud options. But if I were a company and I was considering doing work in the cloud, there are certain things that I would require of that cloud provider to make sure that they're compliant, and therefore would make me compliant. So I don't want to get too involved, but there's a couple of audits that are typically required or should be required. It's an SSAE 16 Type 2 and an ISAE, I think it's 3402 Type 2 audit that goes through and makes sure that the provider has the right type of backup, network security, restoration, the system availability, all of that. So they undergo an audit. Oftentimes it's done by one of the big 4 audit firms to make sure that they've got that they pass that type of an audit. Another is that PCI compliance that we talked about. It needs to have that encryption. It needs to have the Visa and MasterCard secure code. Those are things. And then there's another one that, as I talked a little bit about being international. And if we talk about opening up and being more international in our websites and all, there's one of the things that you should always think about, which is the EU-US Safe Harbor, which is the European Union and United States safe harbor for the transfer of information between the European Union and personal information and the United States, so that in order if a system is EU-US Safe Harbor certified, then that means that it's provided the adequate privacy protection defined by the European Union. And so that would be another thing that I would want to make sure that a cloud provider was going to be compliant in. And then there's other things just from a cloud standpoint that I would just want to make sure that they have, that they have the right seismic engineering, they've got fire suppression, they've got backup power systems, redundant connections, all of those kinds of things.
Okay, another question that came in is, how do I know if that sales tax solution works with my system?
The sales tax solution. I assume that it was talking about that Avalara. So, well, I gave you the name, but you'll see that that particular solution applies to many, many different types of ERP solutions. It's not something where it works only with one or two. It's probably one of the largest used sales tax solutions. A couple of others, another one that we have used is called CCH. So we've used that solution as well. Between the solutions that we're aware of, we typically have found an answer for pretty much all ERP solutions. If it's not that Avalara, it's one of the other ones that we've used.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Okay. Well, we appreciate your attendance today. Hopefully you found value in the material presented. We have the ability to follow up, and should you have any further questions or need assistance, please contact Chris on the information provided on the screen. And there it is. Chris, thank you for your time today. That was a great session. And have a wonderful day, everyone.